Good morning, good afternoon, all the Growth Bank leaders, audience, and all the supporters here. Today, welcome all to the day session two. Basically, we were speaking to IAS officer before this, and now we are talking about. Um, as we all know that we are in COVID situation, so we have lots of challenges to face. As a community, responsible community, Growth Bank community, we would love to bring leaders. We would love to learn from the leaders, from their experience, from their knowledge. So today we have the great leader with us, and we're talking about what's the role of Indian consulate in pandemic times, in during these challenging times. And it's a great day. And my name is Dr. Shivkumar Basavanalli, and I'm the leadership practitioner, growth expert, and corporate leader. I'm excited, I'm thrilled, and to introduce the great leader, head of Chancery and Consul of Indian Consulate of Atlanta, CJI, Mr. Asim Kumar. Sir, welcome to the show, sir.
Welcome. Thank you.
So thank you, sir. Thank you for saying yes to this program, sir. Just to talk about Mr. Asim Kumar, he works as consul in Atlanta and head of Chancery in Indian Consulate in Atlanta. Look after administration, establishments, protocol, security matters, commerce, finance, cultural, and community related NRI services. And Atlanta CJI, Consulate General of India, look after 9 states in US where they serve NRIs, basically NRI services. And welcome, sir, for this show. And sir, would you please talk about yourself, sir?
First of all, welcome to this show, everybody, all who are watching. Namaskar.
Namaskar,
and
sir.
I wish you all the best on behalf of the Indian Consulate. I joined Consulate General of India, Atlanta in August 2018.
Yes.
I joined the ministry in 1991 as a career diplomat, and I have been to several countries. This is my 5th posting.
Okay, sir.
My first posting was Pakistan. After that, I went to United Kingdom. Then I was also posted to Saudi Arabia and Bangladesh. In between, I had 2.5 years to 3 years postings in New Delhi.
Yes, sir.
And I have also visited other countries. In Europe, I have visited France, Germany, Switzerland, Luxembourg, and have been on president visit to Africa since 2018. This is my new assignment in America, and before you, I have met you several times.
Yes, sir.
That's it.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Now we are in challenging times, COVID times, and as we know that you are serving non-resident Indians outside India, so for many decades. We also know that when talking about CJI, Consulate General of India, so in addition to we have one main CJI in Washington, Indian Consulate Embassy in Washington. We also have 5 consulate services in San Francisco, one of them, New York, Houston, Chicago, and Atlanta.
Yeah.
And my question, sir, what's the role of these consulates in serving non-resident Indians, NRI Indians, and also what services does the consulate in Atlanta provide for our people, sir?
See, the role of any embassy is to represent the government of the country.
Yes, sir.
In olden times, we used to have doots, so today also our high commissioners and ambassadors, they are known as Rajdoots.
Yes, sir.
So, and the embassy acts as a channel of communication between the two governments. We convey the views and concerns of our government, take up the issues of the Indians here. We look after the welfare of the Indians. And then we also promote the trade and commerce between the two countries. We disseminate the cultural outlook and information of our country. We promote tourism. In general, we work towards better understanding and development of good relations between the two countries. And all the embassy and all the consulates, they work under overall supervision of the Ministry of External Affairs. See, the consulates are an extended arm of the embassy. Our embassy in Washington, it cannot perform all the functions.
Yes, sir.
So, and the USA is such a big country. So we have 5 consulates. We have in San Francisco, we have in Houston, we have in New York, in Chicago, and in Atlanta. Our consulate in Atlanta was established in 2011 in January.
Yes.
And we started our consular services in October 2012.
Yes, sir.
Since then, we have issued around 1,44,000 visas, around 76,000 Indian passports, 66,000 OCI cards, and 37 miscellaneous services like power of attorney, attestation, life certificates, and all that. So we have the Atlanta has 6 states and 2 territories under its jurisdiction: Georgia, in which we are living. Then we have Alabama, Tennessee. We have Florida, South Carolina, all these states, Mississippi, and then also the territories are Puerto Rico and Virgin Islands. All together in these territories, we have around 4 lakh Indians.
4 lakh.
4 lakh, yes. And that is about 10% of the total Indo-Americans living in USA.
Wow.
So of these around 1,20,000 are in Georgia itself, 1,80,000 are in Florida, and 1 lakh in rest of the states. So basically, as the name suggests, the consular post is meant more to provide the consular services, like passports, visas, OCI that I already told you. So we are issuing, the Indian consulate at Atlanta is issuing around 50 passports, 50 OCI cards, and around 60 to 70 visas per day. But of course, the visas are suspended now because the international travel itself is suspended. But that is not the only function we do.
Yes, sir.
We have in the consular services also, we have also gone to several consular camps. We have been holding 2 consular camps every month, and we had drawn out a calendar for 2020 also. I had come to Greenville, you remember, and the consular camp we held.
Yes.
So, but now the consular camps are all suspended now in 2020, and we don't know when we will be able to resume it. So apart from these consular functions, we also have the extended functions, the political functions, the commercial functions, the cultural functions, and things which all Washington alone cannot handle.
Yeah. Got
so on the political side, we are in constant touch with the senators, the congressmen, and we brief them about the developments in India, the legislations, the different developments in India. They may have got some different opinions gathered from the media or from unreliable sources. So we give them the authentic version of the government of India. We clarify their doubts.
Yeah.
On the we also inform them about the the social welfare schemes of the government of India, how we are being able to help the vulnerable sections of the Indian society. So all these things, and there are, it's a long to talk. So in short, I have to cover all the topics that you're asking.
Yes.
And then on the economic and commercial side, we are in always touch with the departments of trade and commerce, the chambers of trade and commerce. Recently, there was the South Carolina Chamber of Commerce. They established an office in India office. That has been promoting to the bilateral trade between the 2 countries, the exports on both sides. And it was due to the efforts of this India office that, Sundaram Clayton plant in your South Carolina, it was established in last year in May.
Okay.
And in fact, I was one of the chief guests along with the governor of South Carolina who inaugurated the plant. It is a 90 million facility, which provides employment to around 250 people, and of them 50 are Indo-Americans. And it is producing aluminium die casts, which are supplied to the automotive industry for local consumption here. On the cultural side, we have been a part of all the cultural functions and events that are being organized. We are able to go very easily to those being organized in Atlanta. We have also been to the cultural festivity in other parts. Our Consul General has been going, I myself have been going. We had come to the India Day functions. We are also promoting the the International Day of Yoga for continuously 6 years. We have been holding this now. Other cultural programs and things we also promote. Last year we held the 550th anniversary of Guru Nanak Dev anniversary Jayanti, and we also had a majestic and big show of the Pandit Tejendra Narayan Majumdar, a cultural show, big majestic show.
Yes, sir.
So these are the functions that we do.
That's amazing. So that's amazing. Basically, your CGI, Consulate General of India, is extended arm of Indian government, where you're taking care of serving the NRIs who are living outside India in terms of their cultural requirements, consular requirements, trade requirements. So that's great to know, sir, actually. So when I move on to the next question, sir, in this pandemic situation, challenging situations, are these services, the consular services, are still continuing in the consulate, sir? And also, how has consulate has responding to COVID pandemic situations? How we are coping up, sir, Consulate General India?
So as I told you, the embassies and the consulates are part of the Ministry of External Affairs of the Government of India, and our ministry, under the able leadership of our Prime Minister, is engaged in dealing with the crisis.
Yes.
With an intra-agency approach in coordination with different agencies and ministries, both on the domestic and the international fronts. The Ministry of External Affairs reacted very quickly, and we formed the COVID cell, which is engaged in providing providing relief to the distressed people. And the consulate, they have been issuing advisories to us and the circulars, and we have been putting them on our websites. We have been talking to the people. Our Consul General has had several conversations with the people on virtual platform. So it boosted the morale of the people, and the Ministry of Ayush gave us certain ways of precaution and prevention of the disease. The Consul General informed them of the people of that and asked them to take care of their health. We have also been asking people, encouraging people to come to us in any distress, and we have been receiving panic and distress calls. And we have reached out to the community on our insistence, and on their own also. Many have come out and they have distributed free meals, masks, medicines. We reached out to the students. Students were in great problem here. They were facing accommodation problems. They were stranded. So the universities and the colleges had closed. So the community people, they voluntarily came out. We were in constant touch with them. They, even the temples and the other cultural associations, they offered dormitory type facilities to them.
Yes.
And of course, our capabilities were limited because we also had to obey the orders of the local advisories and the instructions of the Government of India. And we also closed our office, cut down the staff. And so we were operating on a low-key basis. We had the passport services, the visa services, the OCI services. They were all stopped because the international travel was stopped, but we continued with the emergency services. The visas were there.
Okay.
And we are still continuing with the, now we have opened up. Your question is that what we are doing now. We have already opened up, and only except for visas, because visas will be issued only when the international travel resumes.
Okay.
The passport services and the OCI services have been restored to the normal. But during those times when it was closed, we had to again call back all our staff because the students, the businessmen, the interns, the visitors, tourists, people who came for employment, people who came to visit their relatives, those who came to visit their mothers-in-law or fathers-in-law, they were all got stuck up here because the flights were closed because of the increasing COVID situation in India. So for that, the consulate, now the Government of India started a very big evacuation program, the biggest evacuation program in the world, that is the Vande Bharat mission, and also Samudra Setu for evacuation by sea. So we were very actively involved in the Vande Bharat mission, and we have evacuated around 850 people from our region, from the jurisdiction of Atlanta. So the consulate has been playing its role despite this was a very huge task and we were very limited people, but we did it somehow, and because people had to go.
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Actually, just this is a very quite normal question. Like for all of us, we have this consular general in Atlanta. Is it operational? Yes, it's operational for passport services, for OCI, not for visa. Visa is not yet operationalized, but other services like passport renewals and OCI is quite normal. Sir is talking about, and also is talking about Vande Bharat mission. So that's a very the question which I'm going to ask now. After India independence, the biggest mission Indian government of India is carrying out to rescue NRIs is Vande Bharat mission. Sir, would you please, you already touched about it, but would you please talk about what is Vande Bharat mission? How is that helping for NRI Indians who were stranded or were stuck outside India, sir?
Okay. So before that, let me add one point about the services. See, the miscellaneous services we are continuing only by mail and post because we are also observing the social distancing. So it is for the people to know that we are continuing with the services, but now it is through mail.
Okay. By mail or post only miscellaneous.
So the Vande Bharat mission, it was a very huge, very very big task undertaken over by the Indian government. Has earlier also taken over evacuation, but this was the biggest by far. And there are 4 phases, starting from May 7 to May 15th, we had the first phase, then the second phase started, and the second phase was extended.
Yes.
So all the consulates were very actively involved in this, and under the aegis of the Embassy of India, Washington, and in coordination with Air India, our national carrier, was brought in to evacuate the people.
Yes, sir.
So, we had to, the number of people in the Vande Bharat mission, the people who wanted to go to India was very big, very huge. And in one flight can accommodate, how many, 200, 300 people.
Yes.
Because we had to see social distancing, etc. also. So how to accommodate this big number of people was a big challenge because, the embassies and consulates cannot be seen as being partial or subjective. Your agency is more important and yours is less. We cannot decide like that.
Okay.
Everybody has his own regions to go and compelling regions and equally compelling regions. So, we devised a fair mechanism. We asked people to register on the Embassy of India website. They registered, and from that data, we selected people from different categories, like students and interns, like old and sick, and the elderly people, the businessmen, the professionals, under different categories on the basis of a random digital selection.
Okay.
So we do not know who the company is selecting. And the embassies then used to send us. All the consulates had a quota.
Okay.
So Atlanta had its own quota for our own jurisdiction area, and we used to call the people. Then we used to make them understand the modalities, explain to them how to. We explained to them which are the portals there in which you will be quarantining, and that was a big problem because the flights operated from certain cities of USA to certain cities of India. So all the people were not living in those cities. So they had to go back to the home state. So there was a quarantine there and the quarantine there in the home state. So it was a big problem for the people also. So some people dropped out. They wanted to go in the next phase. Then we selected from the lower down the list from the student category, we selected students. From the old and sick, we selected the old and sick. Like that we processed. And it was a 24/7 job.
Okay.
Calling people, making them book their tickets. Some had other problems. They had to wind up because on a short notice, they had to go. They had to wind up quickly. So we assisted them in whatever way we could. And then there were problems of connecting flights because tomorrow if you have a flight from San Francisco and today you are in Atlanta, so you have to book a connecting flight also. So all these problems were there. But at the end of the day, it went off very well. And even now it is going on the third and fourth phase, but the consulates are not very actively involved. Now it is going under, the people are booking directly with Air India and under the aegis of the Washington, of course, our embassy in Washington. But yeah, now even then people call us if they are finding difficulties, having difficulties in getting tickets, we are helping them.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so far in the Vande Bharat, under the Vande Bharat mission, we have been, as of mid-July, around 6,87,000 people have already come to India.
Oh, wow. That's the biggest mission of Government of India. Yes, sir. Yeah, that's amazing, sir. Actually, that's amazing step by Government of India, because wherever there is a crisis, be it in the past, in Gulf countries, in Syria, in many places, wherever is India is the one who stood up and said, "Look, let's go now." Now it's Vande Bharat time, Vande Bharat mission. It's going on, and as you said, phase 1, phase 2 is completed, and 3 and 4 is happening now. So definitely, sir, like we see how. CJI, Consulate General of India, serves people, because I was one who's part of the consular camp in Greenville. So I see like how friendly, how user friendly the staff and the team from CJI under your leadership, and really great like the way CJI is serving people outside India. Thank you, sir. And when I go to the next question, how is India is dealing with, I'm talking about India, how is India is dealing with COVID-19? What has been the Indian government response that of the people, like how India is working with COVID-19 to fight COVID-19 pandemic, sir?
See, India's response to this biggest health crisis of our time has been very timely, very effective. It has been one of information, prevention, caution, and action. You know, when the number of people infected in India was just 500 and the number of deaths were just 10, our country went for the biggest lockdown on the planet. Our Prime Minister, just as the problem started assuming huge proportions, before that, our Prime Minister called for a 14-hour Janta curfew.
Okay, Janta curfew.
Janta curfew, in which he asked the people to lock them up for 14 hours, and he also asked them to come to their balconies and doorsteps and show their solidarity to fight the disease, to battle against the disease by clapping and by banging thalis. And you know, people mesmerizingly, hypnotizingly, they obeyed.
Okay.
But the Prime Minister was actually very far-sighted. He was actually preparing the country for a very, very, very long battle and fight ahead. So very soon he announced a complete lockdown from March 24th. The lockdown went on, and now we are, of course, unlocking. So, you know, India's COVID management strategy is based on basically three pillars.
Okay.
One is testing. Then the second is contact tracing, and third, containment. So even before we had closed our flights, we had made big quarantine centers with very good facilities.
Okay.
And so testing, you know, from a very negligible figure in the beginning, I'm glad to tell you that today India is testing 4.20 lakh samples per day.
Oh, 4.2 lakhs. Okay.
And for contact tracing, you know, all the agencies at hand, even the police help in contact tracing in the remote areas, you know, ASA workers, the ground health sanitation workers, the health workers. It is the accredited social health activists, we call them in village. It is a government scheme. So they help in contact tracing the schools where, you know, then the next step comes containment. We also use the one Arogya Setu app, which is now being used by 140 million people in India. That also we use for contact tracing. After that, after tracing the people and identifying them, we went for containment. So India has been isolating the people from the very beginning, whomever we have doubts. Even our village people, village folk, they are so wise. People coming from outside, they used to vacate the whole school because schools were anyway closed. And they used to provide ration and everything in that school, but people were isolated.
Okay.
So, and India came out with a novel idea of turning the whole railway coaches into isolation wards.
Oh, wow. That's innovative.
So today we have around 2 lakh isolation wards. In fact, 10,000 bed facility was built in Delhi within a week. Today we have around 920 laboratories. which are preparing this RT-PCR and the other antibody test kits. And 75% of these test kits are indigenous.
Okay.
Our PPE production, it was very negligible in the very beginning, but now it has gone up to 500,000 per day, which is 56 times what we were producing when the COVID started. So we are making the best use of all the resources, and we are trying to innovate and do whatever we can. We also have a big health scheme in India, Ayushman Bharat.
Ayushman Bharat.
This is the biggest public funded health scheme on the lines of Obamacare here.
Oh.
And this is the flagship scheme of Government of India, in which around 500 million people are being benefited.
Wow. Mm.
So our Prime Minister has been holding regular meeting with all the stakeholders, including the chief ministers of all the states, and the whole country is united in these efforts. Our 1.6 million force of doctors, nurses, and technicians, they are working day and night, risking their lives to battle this disease. So as a result of this preparedness and efforts, we have been able to check the spread of the disease, though India is now considered to be the third country with the COVID affection. But considering the size of India, India is 1/3 the size of USA, and we have 4 times the population.
Yeah.
So these, the three, we have delayed this spread of COVID by taking all these measures by long period of lockdown, which has given us the time to prepare our medical infrastructure that I just told you.
Okay.
And as a result of all that, the death rate is 15 per million in India, compared against 69 in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
The fatality rate, is 2.7 compared to over 5% of the people affected with COVID. Then, the people affected itself are 538 per million, as against the global average of some 1,500 or so. So we are doing pretty well, and we are very confident we will be able to battle the disease and come over it.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you for that insightful conversation, sir. I think if we are talking about all the growth bank warriors, leaders, we are talking about political and administrative leadership during this pandemic times. And sir, one more thing, just to that, adding to that question, because of this pandemic, because of these challenges, there is a significant impact on the economic slowdown too in India. So how is what are we doing, sir? What's our approach towards that also? It's not just the health crisis, it's also economic crisis now. So what is India's response for that, sir?
See, the economy everywhere in the world is on a downslope.
Yes, sir.
India is no exception. How many people in India have lost their jobs, the daily wagers, they have lost their all sorts of livelihood. They have to migrate from their place of work to their home states.
Yeah, yeah.
All businesses have suffered like elsewhere in the world. So our government has come out with a very massive special economic package of $270 billion, which is about 10% of our GDP.
Okay. And
the government has identified many sectors in which these economic reforms will be introduced. We are bringing about reforms from civil aviation to chemicals and fertilizers to agriculture to mining, space, all the sectors, including the defense sector. The government has enhanced the FDI to 74% in the defense sector.
Okay. Okay.
Major reforms we are envisaging also in the MSME sector, the medium, small and micro industry sector, because that sector employs around it employs around 110 million people, and it accounts for about 29% of the total GDP of the country. So that is also a major sector we are bringing reforms in. Then the Prime Minister has started a Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana, in which free ration is being provided to 800 million people. And recently, the Prime Minister in his address to the nation announced that this will be extended up to November 2020.
Oh,
We are also providing cooking gas to uh, 80 million families.
okay.
That's also a very big number. So we are riding over the initial period of fear and scare, and though the cases are increasing, we are now very much more prepared to fight this battle because the economy cannot remain closed permanently, and we have to get over it. So the economic activity is slowly returning to normal, and we can see the green shoots of recovery.
Yes.
We have a well thought out plan. In the first phase, we have already eased up the domestic travel and the train travel. In the second phase, we plan to open up the schools and colleges.
Okay.
The third phase, we'll open up the rest of the sectors of the economy and, of course, the international travel.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yes, sir. That's very interesting. Like every country is going through this situation, like economic slowdown and health issues and all that. So everyone is taking precautions. India is also massively putting plans in place to fight this pandemic. Also uplift the livelihood. Thank you for giving that detailed orientations on that, sir. The next question, like, please tell us something about Indo-US bilateral relationships in the present scenario, and also with specific to what are the collaborative efforts or collaborative response to fight this pandemic, sir? When I talk about India and US relationships.
India is the largest democracy in the world. United States is the oldest democracy.
Yes, sir.
And in the recent years, both our countries have been coming close together, expanding their horizon of cooperation.
Yes.
We both countries have certain common values of democracy,
Okay.
the rule of law. We both have a federal structure. We both are open. We have open markets. We have freedom of speech, expression in both the countries. So we have a lot in common to have a foundation for a great friendship.
Okay.
And our leaders, they keep on meeting regularly. There are regular exchanges, high-level exchanges of our top leadership, of our ministers, of our officers, both in bureaucracy and diplomacy. There are around more than 50 bilateral intergovernmental mechanisms between our governments. We very fondly recall the visit of your President Trump to India in February this year. Our Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, has been visiting US. He has visited a couple of times, and the most recent and very historic visit was Houston. In September. I was a part of it, the Howdy Modi event.
Howdy Modi, yeah. Howdy Modi.
Yeah. So, both these visits were very historic and very memorable, and they have added a new dynamism to the Indo-US relationship.
Okay. Okay.
USA is India's second largest trading partner. Our bilateral trade in terms of goods and services is around $142 billion. It was in 2018. Over 200 US companies, Indian companies are operating in USA. Of them, 40 are very prominent. And the Indian companies are present in almost all the 50 states of the United States.
Okay.
US is the sixth largest source of foreign direct investment to India. And we have a bilateral defense trade of around 20 billion plus.
Oh,
India is using the Apache helicopters and the Chinook. President Trump, during his visit in India, signed a $3 billion military helicopter deal.
Okay.
We will be procuring the MH-60 Romeo naval and AH-64 Apache helicopters. These deals, they will enhance our joint military capabilities, and our militaries continue to operate and train side by side. We recently had a naval exercise, joint naval exercise. President Trump, during his visit in February, he had also called India as one of the major trading partners.
Yes.
The United States International Development Finance Corporation has approved a $350 million loan and financing facility for use in the financial services sector, the health infrastructure, the renewable energy sector, and the food security space. However, the most important foundation of our nation-to-nation friendship is our people-to-people contact.
People-to-people contact. Okay.
Yeah. We have around 4 million of Indian diaspora in USA.
Okay.
which is about 1% of the total population of USA.
Oh, 1%.
So there are businessmen, many from the Gujarati community. They are holding the hospitality business, gas stations, convenience stores. We have doctors. In fact, every 70% in USA is treated by an Indian doctor. We have the lawyers, engineers, and above all the IT professionals.
Yeah.
So, and we have around 2.27 lakhs of Indian students studying in different universities of the United States.
Okay.
And together they contribute about $7.5 billion to the US economy.
$7.5 billion. Okay.
The Indian IT companies also, they have contributed around $50 billion to the US economy and accounted for 8.4% of the employment in 2017. And the CEOs are many of the big companies here, Google, the Microsoft,
Yes.
Adobe, they're all Indian, MasterCard. That's it. So we are, there's a great scope for going forward, and we are continuously marching ahead in closer cooperation.
Yeah, that's amazing, sir. I think well explained about the contribution and that Indo-US tie-ups in terms of bilateral as well as what would be the what is the India-US collaborative efforts to fight the pandemic, sir? So how are we collaborating two countries to fight this pandemic?
India is known as the pharmacy of the world. We supply medicines to most of the countries, and including the United States.
Okay.
Just as the news of the awareness came that hydroxychloroquine will be a drug in the management of COVID-19, India just jumped in and out voluntarily suo moto it started. Many of the countries have gifted. We have supplied this hydroxychloroquine to about 100 countries, including the United States. In fact, our consulate was a part of distributing medicines down south of here, notably the Dominican Republic, in this year. India and the US, they are jointly developing 3 vaccines. Our Serum Institute in Pune, which has a collaboration with the University of Pittsburgh and the Quadagenix here, and the Bharat Biotech. It has collaboration here with the University of Pennsylvania and also the University of Wisconsin.
Okay.
The US Gilead Sciences has entered India to boost the production of a drug called Remdesivir, which is being found useful in the treatment of COVID. And the Gilead has entered into contract with 7 Indian companies, including the Cipla and the Dr. Reddy's and all. So to expand the production of this generic drug. So this drug is available for $72, and it is the 6-day course of this injectable drug will be just around $432. Okay. In India itself, there are 6 local companies which are developing the vaccine. Recently, the government has given nod to the Bharat Biotech to produce Covaxin, and to the Zydus Cadila to produce another vaccine called ZyCoV-D. And very recently, the human trials have also started in India. Okay. And we will, of course, we will be distributing the medicines because most of the vaccines are produced in India, and we will be providing to the other parties as well as the USA.
Yes. Yeah. That's amazing, actually, sir. Actually, I know we hope that soon we get this vaccine for the pandemic, and because there's so many efforts are going on each country-wise. So India is also marching towards getting the vaccine. Sir, when we are talking to leader, we are in a, as we know that we are in a pandemic situation, we are talking to leader, Consulate General of India, Head of Chancery, Consul, based in Atlanta, Mr. Asim Kumar, and all the Growth Bank warriors, leaders, audience. This is the Leadership Network. We are listening to the leader and learning what are India's steps, or Consulate General of India's, their steps about the pandemic, facing this pandemic. Sir, when I talk about the next question, last year we heard lot of commotion, an article 370, and also a CAA, Citizenship Amendment Act. As a common man, what is that basically, sir? Could you brief us on the topic, sir? Like, what is the point of view of Indian government?
The Article 370 was a very temporary and transitional clause in the Indian Constitution.
Okay. Okay.
The Kashmir has a history. All the
Yeah.
principal states joined the Indian Union. The state of Kashmir also joined. It was under Raja Hari Singh. They signed an instrument of accession,
Okay.
and he put forward certain conditions that we want autonomy in these fields, and it was all incorporated in the form of Article 370.
Okay.
Later on, 35A was also added to this
Okay.
article, and both these articles together, this 35A had a retrospective effect. And both these provisions in the Indian Constitution, they had the actual impact of separating Jammu and Kashmir from the rest of India, because the Jammu and Kashmir had its own flag. Jammu and Kashmir had its own constitution, and it had autonomy over its own affairs. You know, the Jammu and Kashmir government, on the basis of this articles introduced, they started giving the permanent residency certificates to the people. And there are two kinds. There was the gender discrimination.
Okay.
You know, the gents were given some other kind of certificate. The ladies were given a certificate valid till marriage only.
Okay. Okay.
So valid till after marriage, they had to get a new certificate.
Mm.
Which means the provision was that if a lady married outside the state of Jammu and Kashmir, she was no longer, her children would no longer have the property.
Okay.
There are other discriminations. You know, the Safai Karmcharis there, all the provisions, the safety standards which were available to the people in the rest of India, they were not available to the people in the Safai Karmcharis in Jammu and Kashmir, and they were permanently destined to be Safai Karmcharis. There was no, the reservation as extended to the weaker sections of the society in the rest of India. It was not available to the people in Jammu and Kashmir. And above all, the people of Jammu and Kashmir could go and study anywhere in India.
Yes, sir.
They could go and buy property anywhere in India. But the rest of the people of India, it was not reciprocal.
Okay. Okay.
People of India could not go and buy property there. They could not settle there. They could not have employment there. Their children could not study there. So the best of the talent did not go to the Jammu and Kashmir. The people there remained underprivileged. They uneducated. They did not have the best of the health facilities. The only industry was tourism industry. And because of the rising militancy, the terrorism, I will say, that industry was also crippled.
Mm-hmm.
The government of India was giving around $40 billion, about 10% of the total funds given to the different states were given to just 1% of the population of Jammu and Kashmir. But it did not reach the people. It was all frittered away due to the deep-rooted corruption, and it was gobbled up all by the politicians and the vested interests.
Mm-hmm.
So many people in the past, they had been talking of removing the Article 370, but the pleas were given that since the Constituent Assembly, which brought this article, had resolved itself, it cannot be removed. But that was not a constitutional fact.
Okay.
It was added by presidential order. We removed it by the due process of law, and it was passed in both houses of the parliament
Okay.
on 5th of August 2019, and it became an act. And at the same time, we also reorganized the state of Jammu and Kashmir into two parts. One part became the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir, the other part became the Union Territory of Ladakh. And from 1st November, they are separate Union Territories. You know, the basic purpose was to actually bring equality to all the citizens of India and bring the state of Jammu and Kashmir at par with the other states of India.
Okay.
There were a lot of commotion and noises because the vested interests, when their interests are snatched, they will naturally make noise. They made noise there in India. They were making noise abroad. They misled the people and politicians abroad. But the real fact is that the abrogation of Jammu and Kashmir has not infringed upon anyone's rights, and it has given rights to the people. It does not in any way affect the international border. It is totally an internal matter of India, and it was done with the view to bring about better governance, better administrative efficiency, to remove the regional disparity.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
It's basically you're talking about it's internal, and because for the people benefits, this is implemented, and
Yeah.
this is just yes, sir. Thank you for that wonderful conversation, sir. Actually, We spoke about a lot on the consular services and Vande Bharat mission.
You also asked me about the CAA.
CAA, yes, CAA, yeah, yes.
CAA also, yes, it raised last year a lot of commotion. CAA is actually a Citizenship Amendment Act. We have a Citizenship Law Act of 1955.
Okay.
How India was divided, how the partition was done. India, we had Pakistan and Bangladesh also as our parts before 1947. Much before that, Afghanistan was also a part of India. The partition took place, on the basis of religion. All the three states, the Bangladesh, Afghanistan, and Pakistan, are theocratic states. Many people belonging to the minority religions, they fled from there because they were facing religious persecution.
Okay.
They were the Hindus, the Sikhs, the Jains, the Buddhists, the Christians, and the Parsis. So they fled to India, and they were living a life of the miserable life here. They had no Aadhaar card, no identity, no nothing. They didn't have any job.
Okay.
Didn't have any rights. So it was a humanitarian approach. We should have provided these people. Where else will they go if they are being persecuted in the neighboring countries?
Yeah.
So we have provided citizenship to all those people who came before 31st December 2014 and had been living here.
Okay.
So now this act will make them equal citizens, and it will give them jobs, and many of the people, their children were working in restaurants, they were uneducated, they didn't have any facilities. So the noise was again raised by the vested interests, and the Citizenship Amendment Act, first of all, it does not take away the citizenship of any person, rather it gives citizenship.
Okay.
It does not affect any person in India, whether Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, Christian, or whatever.
Sure.
It is only about the minority in the neighboring countries.
Okay.
A lot of hue and cry was raised, why not Muslims from those countries?
Okay.
So, these countries are Muslim countries, and it is really a very wild imagination to imagine that some Muslims are being persecuted in Islamic countries. So it was given to those minorities who were suffering persecution there.
Okay.
No Muslim citizen or Hindu citizen or Sikh citizen of India is affected by this CAA.
Oh, no one is affected.
All the commotion was all political. To create unrest in India, to give a bad image of India by the vested interests. They have carried out propaganda abroad also.
Yes, sir.
So it is an enabling law. It's not anyone, nobody is being snatched, no person of India is being given, nobody is being even deported from India. It doesn't affect the Indian citizen at all, I mean.
Okay, so sorry.
From the neighboring countries, we have been humanitarian, we are giving citizenship to those unprivileged, underprivileged people who just fled due to religious persecution.
Okay. Because you're talking about this is just since like a simple humanitarian act supports the people who are underprivileged in neighboring countries. This is just that. There's nothing to do with any other regular people or regular citizens. So thank you, sir, for giving such a clarity on both basically in Article 370 as well as CAA. Sir, as we moving on to the last portion of this conversation, leadership conversation, like what's your message? Because you are very active in culturally in our community in the states, 6 states, and what's your message to the Indian diaspora, sir? Like, what do you want to talk about during these challenging times?
As I told you in the beginning, I have traveled to many countries, and everywhere the Indian diaspora is an outstanding class of people.
Okay.
They are the most peace-loving, most law-abiding and hardworking people in any country, and so here in United States also I have seen.
Okay.
They have built up big businesses. Any Indians I meet, I keep on visiting, going to different cultural functions here and there, Greenville. All the people, they mind their own business. They are into no foolhardy thing. They are active culturally in their own societies. They are educating their children. They are trying to achieve more and more. And they have made a good identity here in the country. In USA, we are 1% of the population, but the Indian American community is the richest and the fastest growing ethnic community. It is the richest foreign nationality here.
Okay.
But one thing I have noticed, and I have been telling people that our Indian people, they tend to move in their own groups,
Okay.
regional identities. We have the Gujarati associations, even within the associations, we have sub-associations, we have different sects, this Samaj, that Samaj, we have the Bihar and Jharkhand Association, we have the Rajasthan Association, and then we have the Rajput Association. These, when you are abroad and even in India, you have to forget your regional identities, rise over your regional identities,
Yes.
and just remember that you are Indians. So I have been telling all those whom I meet that please mix up with other groups,
Okay.
form Indian associations so that you can know each other, exchange your views and concerns with each other,
Okay.
cooperate with each other, and different other nationalities who are less than us in numbers, they have drawn more attention here. Why? Because we are not united.
Okay.
So I will appeal my message. The strongest and the biggest message is please unite. United we stand, divided we fall. All Indians in whichever sects, whichever regions are doing exceedingly well. If you pool your resources, talent together, know each other, you create a strong united force and you draw the attention and you will be a force to reckon with here.
Okay. That's a powerful call.
So that's what I want. When I came here and my Consul General and I came here at the same time, so we were invited to the different Diwali functions. So we appealed to the different associations and groups. Why don't you have a common Diwali? Okay. So initially there were little bit hiccups how to live our Diwali. We said, if you don't live your Diwali, you do observe your Diwali. Our Consul General's message is the same. It is of unity. See, on different platforms, he has been stressing unity of the people, unity of the Indians. So she was able to bring all the associations together, and finally a Federation of Indian Associations was born in Atlanta, and we had a United Diwali. We had a United Diwali for the second year this year, and we hope that we will be having this year also. So the same, I appeal to all the Indians everywhere, have your city Indian associations, then merge with the state Indian association, have a Pan-American Indian association. The second message that I would like to give, of course, in the pandemic times, during the COVID times, please observe all the protocol. Very soon we will have vaccines. Some sort of better treatment will come up. Till that time, please bear with the losses, whatever. Be resolute, be firm, stay home, stay healthy, and don't lose hopes.
Don't lose hopes. That's amazing. One is like come together and for the greater cause, and also be during this challenging situation until we get the vaccine and medication. Stay safe and stay healthy and take care of yourself. We are in a leadership network, Growth Bank, and we are talking to Mr. Asim Kumar, like Consul and Head of Chancery, CJI Atlanta, Consul General of India. So thank you for your time, for giving all this wisdom or all these insights about what's going on now in the world, about mainly in India, in Indo-US relationships, about consular services, about Vande Bharat mission. So thank you, sir. Thank you for that wonderful conversation. Thank you for your time, and have a great day, sir.
Thank you. Same to you. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Jai Hind.